Have you ever woken up one morning and felt like the life you built piece by piece was slowly slipping out of your hands? That's how it began for me. The air outside was heavy, damp with mist, and I shuffled to the kitchen like I always did, trying to ignore the aches that had become part of my daily routine. For years, this old two-story house by the coast had been my sanctuary, the place where my late wife and I built our world together. I thought the silence of the mornings was the hardest part, until the sound of tires crunching on the driveway reminded me how quickly peace can be broken. I pulled my robe tighter and stepped onto the porch, and there they were, my son Daniel, his wife Carla, and their 2 kids spilling out a silver SUV as if they owned the place. 6 suitcases. 6. Daniel forced a smile, mumbling something about renovations at their home, while Carla hardly glanced at me, already barking orders as she dragged bags across the gravel. "We'll only be here a few weeks," Daniel said, avoiding my eyes, but his tone gave him away. I already knew a storm had just walked through my front door. Inside, the invasion was immediate. Carla tore through my refrigerator, tossing out cheese I had bought days ago and meat I'd been saving for supper. "You'll poison yourself with this stuff," she scolded, her voice carrying that sharpness that grated against my patience. Daniel drifted around the rooms with his phone glued to his ear, and then casually announced that they'd be taking the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one lined with Miriam's books and photographs, the one that still smelled faintly of her perfume. I said no. I insisted the stairs kept my joints strong, but they'd already decided. My protests were brushed aside like cobwebs in a corner. By evening, I was shoved into the cramped guest room, surrounded not by comfort, but by memories I could barely fit into its narrow walls. Everywhere I turned, my home was being rewritten. Carla hung her tasteless decorations on the mantel, shifted my photographs into boxes, and claimed the living room with her reality shows. My grandkids? One barely looked up from his phone. The other mumbled half-hearted greetings before disappearing upstairs where my office used to be. At dinner, I sat silently while Daniel and Carla critiqued the yellow kitchen walls Miriam had once picked out with such joy. "We'll repaint," Carla declared. "Light gray, mint accents. Her vision, not mine." When I reminded her it was my house, Daniel quickly stepped in, speaking of property value and freshening things up. Their glances at each other told me what they didn't dare say aloud. They were planting roots, and I was being uprooted. Day by day, my place in my own home shrank. Carla replaced my coffee with herbal tea, banned my favorite shows, and dismissed my record collection as junk, tossing it into the garage like forgotten trash. I rescued the albums, the rare Miles Davis and Ella Fitzgerald records Miriam adored, tucking them under my bed like contraband. Even my old photo albums, those fragile windows into my youth and family, ended up in the trash. I pulled them out with shaking hands, refusing to let her erase my past. Daniel stepped in again, speaking in that patronizing tone as if I were a child too stubborn to understand what was best. But I knew better. This wasn't help. It was erasure. At night, in the quiet of that suffocating little room, I would sit with Miriam's picture pressed between my palms and wonder how it had come to this. They said they'd stay weeks, but I could already feel it. This was no visit. They were moving in, reshaping the house, reshaping my life, and little by little, pushing me out. The walls that once held decades of love and laughter now echoed with someone else's routines, someone else's voices, someone else's rules. And me? I felt like a ghost haunting my own home, watching my footprints vanish under their heels. I thought of the day Miriam and I had bought this place, standing proud on the porch, dreaming about our future. She was gone now, stolen by illness, and I was left fighting to hold on to the last piece of us that remained. But as the rain tapped against the windows one Sunday morning, something shifted in me. I knew I couldn't just sit back and watch my life be dismantled. Not yet. Not like this. Rain tapped against the glass as I sat alone in that cramped room, headphones muffling the emptiness with the sound of old jazz. It was one of the few comforts left to me, something my grandson Leo had set up on my phone. Outside, the drizzle carried me back to nights long ago when Camila and I would curl up by the fireplace, speaking softly of dreams we thought we'd still have time for. A gentle knock at the door pulled me out of memory. I braced myself, expecting Daniel or Carla with another order, but instead was my granddaughter, Rosa. She peeked in nervously and asked if she could come inside. Her visits had been rare since they arrived, and her sudden presence made me sit up straighter. She stepped into the room and looked around, her eyes widening at the piles of books, records, and photo albums stacked around me like rescued relics. "So this is where it all went," she whispered. I told her not everything. Some of it her mother had tossed out, without a second thought. Rosa's face fell, and she perched at the edge of the bed, fidgeting with her shirt before finally confessing why she had come. She'd overheard her parents. They weren't just planning to stay. Carla's own parents were selling their house and moving in here. My stomach dropped at her words. Even if the walls stretched twice as wide, there wouldn't be space for all of us. I asked where they expected me to go, though deep down I already knew. Rosa's voice quivered as she admitted the truth. They'd already chosen a nursing home for me, deposit paid, plans made. The anger surged so hard my hands shook. After all the years I'd worked, built this home with my wife, raised Daniel under its roof, I was nothing more than an obstacle to be cleared away. Rosa flinched at my outburst, but I steadied myself and softened my tone. She had risked much to warn me, and for that I was grateful. I told her I didn't yet know what I would do, but I wouldn't give up without a fight. That evening, the so-called family meeting confirmed her warning. I sat in my old chair, the last throne left of me, while they laid out their plans with patronizing smiles. Carla spoke to me as though I were a child, insisting they only worried about my health, pointing to peeling paint and forgotten pills as evidence of my decline. I cut through the act, saying plainly what I knew, that they needed space for her parents. Daniel avoided my gaze, leaning on rehearsed lines about safety, about not being able to watch over me forever. Their words dripped with concern, but the truth was sharp beneath it. They wanted me gone. Carla painted a glowing picture of Pine Grove, calling it a community for active retirees, with pools and libraries and endless activities. I'd read the truth. It was a cheap, neglected facility barely fit for those who had no one left to fight for them. I told them I wasn't going anywhere, but my refusal only hardened their resolve. Carla warned of legal guardianship, doctors ready to sign away my independence if I resisted. Daniel sat silent, unable to meet my eyes. That silence cut deeper than her threats. My own son, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, was willing to declare me unfit just to clear me out of the way. I realized then that in this battle I had no allies but Rosa, and even she, young and powerless, could only watch from the sidelines. My strength was no match for their plans, their lawyers, their resources. In the end, my voice cracked as I gave in, agreeing to leave, though I promised myself I would never forgive the betrayal. The days that followed blurred together. Carla and Daniel sifted through my belongings, deciding with cold efficiency what I would be allowed to take. My shelves of books, my collection of stamps, boxes of photographs, all deemed unnecessary and shoved into storage. Rosa tried to smuggle a few treasures into my suitcase. A photo album, a trinket of Camila's, fragment of the life they wanted erased. She whispered apologies as she tucked them between my shirts, but I told her it wasn't her fault. None of this was on her shoulders. On the morning of my departure, I rose early and stepped into the misty yard. The bay shimmered in silver fog, and I stood breathing it in, aching at the thought that I might never see again. This was the view Camila and I had once promised each other we would grow old with. Now it was being stolen from me. Daniel found me there, cheerful in a hollow way, saying the car was packed. Carla flitted around with satisfaction in her voice, as if the weight of me was finally lifted from her life. 2 suitcases, 1 box. That was all they left me from a lifetime. I didn't argue. I slid into the back seat beside Rosa, grateful at least for her presence. Her brother had chosen not to come. Too busy, he'd said. In truth, I was relieved. The fewer eyes on my humiliation, the better. The drive was short but brutal. Landmarks blurred past the window. The post office where I spent decades working. The small store where I once bought flowers for Camila every Friday. The park where we used to walk hand in hand. Each sight twisted the knife. And then Pine Grove, just as I feared. A grim 3-story building of gray brick. its yard lifeless, its windows filled with vacant stares from forgotten souls. Carla still tried to dress it in lies, praising it as cozy, as if we were touring a hotel instead of a holding pen. Rosa squeezed my hand. We both knew the truth. The receptionist greeted us with a tired smile, rattled off rules and schedules, and pointed to the narrow room that was now my home. Daniel shuffled awkwardly through his farewell, muttering promises of visits that I knew would never come. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, staring at the blank walls, the echo of my wife's laughter nowhere to be found. For the first time in years, I let the weight of it break me, and silent tears slid down my face. I didn't answer. What could I have said? That the sight of them only deepened the wound, that betrayal like theirs carved too deeply to be forgiven, that they had dismantled my life just to make space for their own comfort. Alwyn's arms tightened around me, her tears damp against my shirt, and I tried to hold on to that small ember of love. "I'll come see you, grandfather," she whispered, voice trembling like a promise too heavy for her years. "I promise." I stroked her back gently. "I know you will, sweetheart. Take care of yourself." When the door finally closed, I sat alone on the stiff bed and, for the first time in years, I allowed myself to weep. The tears came steady, soaking the silence, as I stared at the sterile walls of this place that had been forced upon me. The first week inside Pine Grove felt like a punishment handed down by some invisible judge. The food was tasteless, the rules suffocating, and the people around me, well, most had long since given up. Some shuffled the halls aimlessly. Others muttered names of children who no longer recognized them. I clung to the few books I had managed to smuggle in, flipping through their pages as though they were lifelines. Every so often, I drifted to the common room, my eyes pulling toward the parking lot, praying to see Alwyn's small car. But it never came. On the 10th day, while I struggled with a bowl of something they dared call chicken stew, I heard a voice that pulled me back decades. "Obadiah? Obadiah Lamb." My spoon froze. I looked up and nearly dropped it. A tall, wiry man with a gray beard and sharp eyes was staring at me in disbelief. "Ferris." My heart jumped. "Ferris Dunham?" He grinned, and suddenly I was staring at the ghost of my younger years, a friend I thought I'd lost forever. We had once worked shoulder to shoulder in the Postal Service, but life had scattered us like leaves in the wind. He sat across from me, shaking his head. "What in God's name are you doing in this place?" I gave a bitter smile. "My son thought this was where I belong. And you?" He sighed. "Second stroke. My daughter couldn't manage me. So here I am." For hours we sat in the faded common room, trading pieces of our broken stories. He spoke of how his house was sold, how his treasures were scattered, how little by little he had been forced to accept the cage he was placed in. But then he turned his keen gaze on me. "You're not like the rest, Obadiah. You walk steady. Your mind is sharp. Your hands don't shake. Why let them bury you before you're gone?" His words sparked something in me I hadn't felt since before Miriam died. I told him everything about Ingram, about Beatrix, about being pushed out of my home like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. Ferris leaned closer. "Is the house even theirs yet?" I hesitated, then admitted the truth. "No, it's still in my name. They never transferred it. Too cheap to pay the tax." He let out a low whistle. "Then you're holding cards, old friend. You could sell it." The idea stunned me. Sell it? That house was stitched into every memory of Miriam, every lesson taught to Ingram, every laugh shared. "Think about it," Ferris pressed. "They threw you away, using your own roof as their comfort. Why not teach them what it means to lose?" That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought gnawed at me. Revenge wrapped in justice. Freedom wrapped in a signature. The next morning, Ferris introduced me to his nephew, Horace, a sharp-eyed man with a smile too polished to be entirely honest. We met in the neglected garden behind the home, hidden from the orderlies. Horace wasted no time. "Your friend explained the situation. With property in that area, Mr. Lamb, I can guarantee buyers who will leap at the chance." I frowned. Even with me still alive? Even with my son squatting inside? Horace's grin widened, gleaming. "You underestimate demand. A house on the bay is gold. Buyers won't care if you've been forced into this place." Legally, the deed is yours. Unless they've already had you declared incompetent, and they haven't, you can sell. We'll move quietly, quickly. It felt almost criminal, like slipping into a secret war. But wasn't this war already waged against me? Hadn't they conspired in whispers to take my life apart? I still had the keys, tucked in my jacket, forgotten by everyone. Horace leaned forward, lowering his voice. We'll schedule inspections while they're away. I'll arrange for you to leave here under the guise of social outings. No one will suspect a thing. The absurdity of it all nearly made me laugh. 77 years old, and here I was plotting like a spy. But beneath the absurdity was a current of defiance that steadied my breath. For the first time since Miriam's death, I felt alive. 3 days later, Horace called a care home and arranged my first outing. Officially, I was joining a trip to the botanical gardens. In reality, I slipped into his black sedan around the corner, heart pounding like I was breaking out of prison. Nice day for a house tour, Horace said, smirking as he drove. The first buyers were a couple from out of state, wealthy, eager, and looking for a vacation home. They want to gut the place, start fresh, Horace explained. My lips pressed in at the thought of Beatrix's carefully redecorated living room being torn down to the studs. Perhaps that was justice in itself. But as we turned onto my street, my chest tightened. My son's car wasn't there, but another one sat idling in the driveway. Beatrix, or perhaps her parents. Horace slowed, eyes narrowing. Let's check. He dialed a number smoothly, disguising his voice. Clean stream plumbing. We have a request for inspection. Will anyone be home in the next 2 hours? He listened, smirked, and looked at me with a nod. The game had just begun. I see. Thank you very much. Then we'll come tomorrow. He disconnected. No one's home. It's a neighbor's car. They left it in your driveway while their own was being repaired. The woman who answered the phone said everyone was gone for the day. Your son at work, your daughter-in-law and her parents at a furniture store in Rehoboth Beach picking out new bedroom furniture. For my bedrooms, I clarified, anger simmering inside me. Don't worry. They'll be picking out furniture for a whole other house soon. Horace winked and turned the car around. We have about 3 hours before they get back. More than enough time to look around. The couple from New York, the Websters, were waiting for us nearby at a coffee shop. They were exactly as I had imagined, polished, confident, with that peculiar look of people used to always getting their way. Mrs. Webster inspected the house with clinical precision, running her finger along the kitchen counter. It's not a bad layout, but everything's outdated. The kitchen, the bathrooms, everything needs a remodel. Mr. Webster, meanwhile, admired the view of the bay and the lot size. Plenty of room for a pool, he mused. I stood silently as strangers dissected the future of my home, speaking of tearing down and rebuilding the walls that held my life. Pain stabbed me, but beneath it was a flicker of liberation. Home, I realized, was not brick and wood. It was memory, and memory no one could demolish. The Webster stayed about an hour, probing with questions about the roof, the utilities, the foundation. Horace fielded them smoothly, only glancing at me when needed. At last, Mrs. Webster turned to me. Your agent mentioned you want a guest house, Mr. Lamb, but I don't see one here. I admitted it wasn't built yet, though there was plenty of room. Her face tightened. That complicates things. We want a vacation home, not to share space. She avoided saying it outright, not with an old man. I understood. Maybe this wasn't the right fit. On the ride back to Pine Grove, doubt crept into my voice. Maybe no buyer would agree to the guest house clause. Horace, however, was unfazed. Tomorrow's client is different, he assured me. He wants a permanent home here, not just a getaway. The next day, officially marked as a trip to the local history museum, Horace was waiting again. After confirming the coast was clear, we met the new prospect, Thornton Barrington. He wasn't what I expected at all. No expensive suit or air of superiority. Instead, a lean man of 55, sleeves rolled up, his skin bronzed from the outdoors. He shook my hand firmly. Mr. Lamb, it's an honor. Horace told me your story. I admire your fight. Unlike the Websters, He walked through the house not as a buyer, but as someone imagining a life there. He asked about neighbors' history and even Miriam. In the backyard, gazing at the bay, he shared his dream. I'd built a hotel chain from one small motel my father left me. Sold it last year. Now, I want a home by the water. A real home. And a guest house? No problem. My grandfather had one when I was a boy. It was magic to me. I'd love to build you one here. 2 bedrooms, a terrace, looking out at the bay. His voice carried warmth, not pity. I felt my throat tighten, touched more than I care to admit. He laughed gently. Don't worry. I'm not asking you to be my grandfather, but I value history, wisdom. Houses need soul, Mr. Lamb. You've given this one plenty. For the first time since my exile, I felt genuine hope. Thornton made an offer above market price, with the guarantee of building me a guest house to my own design and lifelong residency. He insisted, too, that I retain access to all my belongings until the move was complete. Over the following week, Horace set up meetings with lawyers and architects. We reviewed blueprints, modern, comfortable, with everything adapted for my age. It wasn't just walls. It was dignity, a future. Finally, at the lawyer's office, I signed the papers. Thornton pressed a down payment into my hands. The house would be as in 3 working days. My house, stolen from me by betrayal, would now be my salvation. As we left, relief and anxiety warred inside me. The deal was done. My revenge was sealed. Yet the thought of Ingram and Beatrix learning the truth made my chest pound. Don't worry, Thornton said softly. I'll be with you when you tell them. His calm confidence steadied me. Back at Pine Grove, I spotted Ingram's car in the lot. My heart skipped. Could he know? Impossible. Not yet. That's my son, I muttered. Horace reassured me. Probably just a visit. Say nothing until the registration is official. Ingram did visit, if it could be called that, half an hour of complaints, asking about my health like I was already on death's door. No mention of home. No hint my exile might end. Only as he left did he toss out, by the way, Dad, Saturday's a party. Beatrix's father's birthday. 75. We're hosting at your house. I couldn't hold back the bitterness. At my house. He frowned, caught off guard. Well, technically still your house, yes. But you don't mind, right? They moved in last week. Sold their place. We remodeled upstairs a bit. His words dug into me, but I held my secret close. The papers were signed. My revenge was set. I don't mind, I lied, forcing a smile. Plenty of room for everyone. Ingram visibly relaxed, relieved at my compliance. I knew you'd understand. Just temporary until... He stumbled, unwilling to finish. Until you find me something better than Pine Grove. I prompted. Exactly, he said quickly, missing the irony in my voice. When he left, I sat by the window, watching the lot, my mind already on Saturday. The lawyer said the registration would be complete Friday. Thornton and Horace would be with me. And then, at last, the truth would surface. The ride back to Pine Grove felt lighter than any I had taken before. The tension that had been coiled in my chest for weeks was loosening, replaced by a calm strength I didn't think I would ever know again. Horace kept glancing at me from the driver's seat, perhaps expecting me to collapse under the weight of what had just happened, but I was steady. I had faced my son, his wife, her parents, and all their carefully constructed lies, and I had walked out with my dignity intact. At Pine Grove, I began packing my belongings, not with sadness but with purpose. Each book, each photograph, each small keepsake I folded into the suitcase felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Residents who had grown accustomed to my quiet presence stopped by to watch, some even wishing me luck. They saw in my determined movements something rare for this place. Escape. For once, I wasn't just leaving. I was being carried into a future of my own choosing. Thornton visited the next morning with fresh blueprints in hand. He laid them out on the small table in my room, smoothing the paper with callous fingers. The guest house he had promised me was already taking shape on paper. A cozy living room with wide windows opening to bay, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a terrace where I could sit with my coffee and watch the tide shift. "We'll start construction next week," he said with a reassuring smile. "I want you there when the foundation is poured. It should be your home from the very beginning." I found myself imagining the sound of hammers, the smell of fresh wood, the laughter of workers as they built walls meant for me. It was no longer a dream or a bargaining chip. It was real. And as the days passed, the bitterness that had gnawed at me for months began to soften. Even thoughts of Ingram and Beatrix no longer filled me with the same sharp pain. They had chosen their path, and now I had chosen mine. But there was one thing still unresolved. Miriam. Her absence weighed heavier now that the house was no longer mine. That garden where she had planted roses, the porch where we had watched countless sunsets, those places would soon belong to strangers. And yet, as Thornton reminded me gently one evening over dinner, memories don't vanish with bricks and mortar. They live on in the heart that carries them. I realized then that I wasn't losing Miriam with the house. She was with me still, in every quiet breath and in every choice I made to live with dignity. When the first beams of the guest house were raised, Thornton insisted I stand beside him, watching the crew work. "This is the start of your new chapter, Obadiah," he said. As the hammering echoed across the lot, I felt something stir inside me, not just relief, not just defiance, but hope. For the first time in years, I was not simply surviving. I was beginning again. Alwyn's company became a source of warmth in my new life. She listened with genuine interest when I told her stories about my youth. And in return, she shared her dreams of working in finance, of one day becoming independent from her parents' control. I could see her admiration when she spoke about my courage to reclaim my life, and it touched me more than I expected. For the first time in years, I felt like a true grandfather, not just an old man kept out of sight. One afternoon, as we walked by the bay, Alwyn stopped and looked at me with a serious expression. "Grandpa," she said softly, "I don't want to end up like them, always chasing money, always thinking about inheritance. I want to live differently." Her words carried a conviction that reminded me of Miriam's honesty. I smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then you won't, Alwyn. You've already chosen another path." Meanwhile, Ingram's calls became less frequent, though I knew he hadn't given up. Beatrix tried once more, sending me long letters written in flowery tones, half pleading, half accusing, as if words could undo what had been done. I didn't answer. Thornton and Horace had advised me to keep my distance and let the papers and contracts speak for themselves. Still, each time I saw the number appear on my phone, I felt a pang of sadness. They were my blood, after all. But blood had not stopped them from casting me out. The guest house rose quickly on Thornton's property. Every week, I visited the site, watching the walls take shape. It was modest, but built with care. Wide windows facing the water, a ramp instead of steps, a small study where I could read, and perhaps even take those photography courses. The idea of a home built specifically for me filled me with a sense of belonging I hadn't known in years. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, I stood on the balcony of my apartment with Alwyn. She leaned on the railing, her hair catching the golden light, and I realized how much had changed since that day at Pine Grove. I was no longer trapped. My life had become my own again. "Do you regret it, Grandpa?" Alwyn asked suddenly. "Selling the house?" All the conflict. I took a deep breath, watching the horizon blur into twilight. "No," I said firmly, "because for the first time in a long time, I'm living, not just surviving." And with that truth spoken aloud, I felt the weight of years lift, replaced by something rare and precious, hope. When Alwyn spoke about her dreams, and I realized how much I had missed while living under the same roof, a quiet sadness passed through me. Ingram and Beatrix kept trying to push their way back into my decisions, calls, letters, sudden visits with rehearsed pleas. Each time, I listened, but their words no longer had the power they once did. When they complained about the housing market, I reminded them gently that fewer rooms might actually bring them peace. When they shifted the conversation to inheritance, I revealed the trusts I'd already secured for grandchildren, untouchable by their hands. The shock on their faces was almost painful to watch, because in that moment, I finally saw the truth. Their concern was never for me, only for what they believed was theirs to take. The more they pushed, the calmer I became. My strength wasn't in arguments. It was in finally knowing my own worth. I told them plainly. I had given them more than enough, and it was my turn to live for myself. After that, their visits grew shorter, their voices less demanding, until eventually they faded into the background of my new life. Thornton, on the other hand, stood by me with unwavering loyalty, sending me updates on the guest house construction as if it were his own dream taking shape. He confided one afternoon that life had stolen from him the chance to build a family, and yet, through friendship, he felt a piece of that missing bond restored. I told him that family isn't always blood. It's the people who choose to stand with you when no one else will. Day by day, I found pieces of myself I thought had vanished forever. Long walks by the ocean filled my lungs with air I hadn't breathed in years. My new wardrobe gave me back dignity I didn't know I had lost. Photography lessons sparked a fire I hadn't felt since my youth. And then there was Eleanor, bright eyes, sharp wit, gentle laughter. What began as casual companionship bloomed into something more fragile, more precious. Alwyn saw it before I did. "You're different, Grandpa," she said, looking at me with pride rather than pity. And she was right. For the first time in decades, I wasn't surviving. I was living. When the guest house was finally complete, sunlight poured into wide windows overlooking the bay, and it felt like the past had loosened its grip on me entirely. Thornton arranged a small gathering, not out of obligation, but out of genuine joy. I looked around at the circle of faces. Alwyn, laughing without fear of her parents' shadow. Eleanor, standing close enough that her hand brushed mine. New friends I had chosen myself, not inherited through duty. As the sunset painted the water in gold, Thornton raised his glass to new life. And everyone echoed it, voices carrying warmth into the evening air. I lifted my own glass, my voice steady, my heart light. Here's to the courage of starting over, to living each day without surrendering to someone else's will, and to the truth that it is never too late to choose freedom. The cheer that followed carried me higher than I had stood in years. In that moment, I understood what happiness really meant. Not wealth, not legacy, but belonging, laughter, and the strength to say yes to life when it matters most. And if this story touched you, if it made you think of second chances and the beauty of new beginnings, then let's keep sharing these lessons together. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what this journey made you feel.